Welcome to this edition of Midday Mentors. I'm Richard Pharro. I'm the CEO of APMG International. And today I'm delighted to be speaking to Ray Uys. Now, Ray is someone I've only known for about a year, but he has a lot of experience in something that seems to be a very hot topic at the moment, about user experience. He's got an interesting job title, one I've never heard before, as the Chief Experience Officer of the Immersion Group based in South Africa. So, Ray, you've been in this business for about a decade. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself, the Immersion Group, and what is this thing called user experience?
Perfect. Thank you, Richard. Thank you for everybody. And I'm really pleased to be able to speak to you today. I think to start off with, my personal career started, almost 2 decades ago now, and kind of fortuitously fell into the world of experience design. I was gunning to be a business analyst, which was quite popular at the time, and landed almost through chance into an early kind of pioneering company that was looking at the world of usability engineering, which was a forerunner to the world of what we currently call experience design. And what really grabbed me at the time was that this discipline wasn't focused on the computer. It wasn't focused on the business process. It was focused on the human being. And that kind of threw me, because it was really about, wow, it's not really about whether or not the computer can make sense and the business process makes sense, but can the human being at the end of the day really understand, work with, and empathize with what they're receiving as a product from the business process and from the computer system. And I basically fell in love with this idea of the psychology of design. Which is what human experience is all really about when we get into the various fields that build the experience design discipline today. So I fell into that by coincidence, not by design. And 20 years later, I don't regret a single day in the field, and I think that's probably a good outcome at the end of the day. So my current title is the Chief Experience Officer for Immersion Group. Immersion Group is a company that specializes 100% in experience design. We don't do anything else. What we really try and help companies do is build a closer relationship between themselves and their consumers. And we do that through both a blend of broad-based customer experience design, which is really looking at the big picture of how an organization connects with its consumers, very specifically user experience design, which is the touch point design between, particularly, for example, a human being and a digital app. And then the connecting glue of experience design, which is what we're working with yourself with, Richard, and the APMG group around launching a course for understanding the world of experience design. So currently my job is a bit broad-based, but I enjoy every day of it.
over that 10 or 20 years, however long you want to go back looking at it, there's been expressions like UX, UE, CX, and now there's XD. Is there really any difference between them, or are they all the same thing, but as things have evolved, people have called them something different?
You know what, Richard, it's a great question, because there is a difference. It's a subtle difference, but it's a difference. And I think at the heart and soul of it all, we talk about this thing called an experience. Like we're saying, our job as experience designers is to create a positive, preferably life-changing experience for a consumer of something, whether that consumer is a consumer of a product or a space, maybe they're in an environment or a digital application. There is something that is being experienced, a company and a product and a service, a solution, and there's a consumer of that experience, whether they're an employee or a customer or just a general user of something. But in the heart and soul of it, we're trying to create this thing called an experience. But each of these disciplines are slightly separately focused on some component of that value chain, right? So, and I think very fundamentally, it's because they originated from different base fields.
Right.
So if you take something like the user experience community, at the heart and soul of that is constructs like industrial engineering, human-computer interaction science, human factor science. These are people who spent their time going, how does a human being work with a product? right? And that product can be physical, it can be digital, it doesn't matter, right? How does a human being work with the product, right? So how does the eye work, and how does that drive visual attention? How does the hands work, and how does that make you interact with the device differently, more or less successfully, right? How do you cognitively, how does your memory work? Therefore, how likely are you to be able to work with something that requires you to remember and use short-term memory to get an outcome? This was the world of UX. And it was first called usability, and it was later called UX. The X is actually very important when people realized that there was an emotional construct, not just a physical one, right?
Really,
you
is that where it came
felt
from?
something.
I just thought UX was, well, you need an acronym, and UX is a good acronym. There was a reason behind it.
I would labor another hour conversation on whether or not it is an acronym or whether people do it for real. But I think for a fact, the X is important. The emotional experience you have drives your desire to interact with something, and drives the positive reward that you take away from using it. So it became user experience design when we realized that satisfaction was not enough. We had to go further. We had to do something more than just satisfaction, and that's where the world of experience design came. Customer experience, on the other hand, originated in the world of marketing, brand, and customer value proposition design, right? Customer value management. So if you thought about the UX world as kind of human-computer interaction, the CX world came in from brand management, marketing management, customer value proposition management. But it came to a similar conclusion. An experience is something that matters. Yeah. So how does a brand create an experience? Right? Of course, every time you touch a brand, you have an experience. So the total experience that you have with the brand is the culmination of all of these moments of truth that you have across all of these interactions, the radio ad that's playing, the website you go to, the product you physically get, the packaging it comes in, right? So the CX world came as like kind of a blanket that said we have to help organizations manage this broad-based customer experience at the end of the day. But it came from a different world from the UX people, right? And then the service design guys came in and they said, actually, it's important to make an experience something a company can actually deliver, right? Because what's the point of designing something on paper, right?
That's not a bad thing, being able to deliver it.
It makes sense, doesn't it, right? It makes perfect sense. So the service design guys came in and said, we need to take this thing called an experience and we have to translate it into the operations. And they started to blueprint how, for example, processes had to work and how capabilities had to interplay. But you could almost argue that they came from the world of process engineering, right? So what I think is very important is that all of these elements came together around this broad-based idea of an experience matters. And what the XD world, this new thing that we've been talking about, comes in and says there needs to be glue that holds those human-computer interaction guys, those brand and marketing guys, and those process engineering guys together. Something needs to hold this thing together. And that's actually what experience design does. It tries to create a backbone that allows the rest of the different disciplines to glue their work together around something that creates a coherent experience for the customer at the end of the day.
I mean, that's fascinating. I know you spoke recently at a conference on healthcare. And the importance of XD or user design, experience design in the field of healthcare. So taking your explanations just now, is the customer the product, or is the healthcare the product that the customer is experiencing in the field of healthcare? Because it would be a bit strange for me to be seen as a product as I go through my healthcare journey, or whatever phrase one wants to use. So
correct.
Could you say a little bit about XD and healthcare, and why XD user experience is so important these days in healthcare?
It's a great question, Richard. And I think I was very lucky to speak at that conference with people like Matt Edgar from the NHS. And I think what, when you look at medical and healthcare, as professions, they have been fundamentally empathetic in the way in which they've approached work, right? So a doctor is fundamentally an empathetic person. He's trying to help you get better. And that empathy in that relationship is fundamental to your acceptance of that relationship. You wouldn't, if you felt the doctor was treating you like a number, a statistic to get in and out of his office, you probably wouldn't go back for a second consultation, right? You're looking for that care as an implicit part of the system of healthcare. Now, when healthcare moves digital, and we know that healthcare is slightly behind this game, and HET, conferences like HET, at which I spoke, focused on trying to maneuver and manufacture acceleration in that medical healthcare acceptance of digital as a technology space, right? They're moving into that space. They're behind other industries. But here's the real crux. You can't throw away the empathy that makes this profession work at its heart and soul. So what experience design does is it says, you can't just say it's about technology and process. It's about, and product even, it's about a human being. There is somebody at the end of that value chain, and that somebody is a physiological and psychological, emotional being that's going to respond positively or negatively to what they are receiving. The physical medical profession needs to learn to translate that same empathy to the digital medical profession. And I feel like experience design is the architect of that ability. It allows that empathy to be translated into the digital world so that you don't feel like a product, Richard, because you don't want to feel like a product. You don't want to feel like a number either, right? You want to feel like a human being that's being cared for, and a human being being cared for by a digital mobile app is the same. There's no difference. So how do you feel about that digital mobile app? You must feel the same way that you'd feel about your doctor or your nurse. Otherwise, you're not going to respond to it in a positive way. I think XD helps to move over that gap, it bridges that gap.
And of course, we're seeing that at the moment, aren't we? In the middle of a pandemic, when people are given the opportunity on track and trace and those things, people are not so comfortable putting their details and using that technology, using those apps.
Correct.
So there is that cultural thing to overcome. But moving on, I understand the empathy piece, and I understand putting the customer at the center of it and making it a wonderful experience. I'd love to have a wonderful experience with my utility providers, but that's Absolutely. Another story. But Absolutely. At the technology level, I've also heard recently about site reliability engineering, SRE. So where does that technology layer fit within the XD environment? Is it important? Is it an essential part of it? Or is it now just a given that systems will be always on 24/7?
Yes, I think there's, so site reliability engineering was an interesting construct in that it said we can't just build software if the operations that run the software don't work in a symbiotic relationship to allow the software to be reliable, right? And there's a whole field, and I think Google really was the forerunner of this, to build this symbiotic relationship between software engineering and DevOps and operations as a whole, right? So now, from a UX perspective and a CX and an XD perspective, we're in a very similar symbiotic relationship with technology and with business. And I always think about those three entities playing together. There's a business construct, there's a technology construct, and there's a human construct. Very similarly to the way we talk about desirability, viability, and feasibility having a unified construct. You can't build a desirable product that isn't feasible or viable. You can't build a feasible product that isn't desirable because nobody wants it at the end of the day, right? So what we have to do is think carefully about designing outcomes that are desirable. A consumer wants that experience, that are feasible, and organizations, operations, and technology capability can respond and deliver that target state experience, and viable. The business case at the end of the day is strong and positive. so that the business, which is effectively a commercial entity in most cases, is receiving the reward that it needs in order to continue investing, right? So how do you continue to create a cycle of positive investment? The business needs to be making something at the end of the day, right? So what we have to do as designers is say, how do we, when we work with the creation of an experience, create a multidisciplinary team environment that includes key stakeholders from tech, key stakeholders from business and the various operations environments, and then define that experience not just at the surface layer, not just, you know, this is what the screen looks like on the mobile app, that's not enough. How does it work down the value chain into the operations of the business, very similar to what SRE would do, so that the experience is tangibly realizable at the end of the day?
But haven't you just, in 3 minutes, defined digital transformation? Isn't this now what every business is looking for? That relationship between the customer, the user experience, the technology, the business product, whatever it is. So is this saying then that every business, every digital transformation, every business transformational project needs to have XD at the front end to make sure that whatever they're delivering is going to be feasible, is going to be worthwhile, it's going to be deliverable and achievable? So is this now the answer to our prayers, that it's XD drives digital transformation?
Yeah, I'm super careful of being the silver bullet for anything, Richard. But
I didn't say it was a silver bullet, but is it something we should be looking at the front end? You don't add it on. I
think you're touching something that's very close to my heart here, and I do agree with you, right? I think that when you look at a digital transformation program, and of course these are the flavor of the day, everybody's doing one. They're large investment decisions. You're going to spend, you know, multiple millions trying to drive out the systemic change to your organization. And if you're going to do that, there must be a fundamental business case driving it. Some of that business case is driven by pure cost efficiency, right? So I do something manually today and I drop a platform in that digitizes it, and some cost goes off my book and everybody is celebrating the cost save. But I have never worked in a digital transformation program in the last 10 years that didn't state fundamentally in its business case that customer experience transformation was one of the reasons they were doing the digital transformation. Now, if you stop there just on that statement, if you're going to take a business case and say, I have to differentiate on the experience economy, I don't believe that I can take my products, which are highly commoditized, and differentiate them. And I don't believe that the tech that I am putting in by nature gives me a massive advantage on my competitors who are all putting in the same tech. If I'm putting in a CRM today, I guarantee you so is my competitor. If I'm putting in a digitized payment engine, I promise you so is my competitor, right? You're not differentiating purely on the tech anymore, which is why these guys are all saying we have to have something that differentiates us from the competition. And that statement is always, it's going to be the experience we generate. You can't make that statement without following through, and you can't follow through if you don't bring those experience design disciplines into play and make experience design the leading edge of the sword to make sure that you're differentiating what you're doing at the end of the day. Platforms are commoditized, experience is not. The way in which you put together the outcome for the customer is what experience design has to do. So I think of us as the sharp tip of the spear. You should get the experience design team in first. You should allow them to help to create the value proposition you're driving, and the technology should be something that enables the transformation rather than the tech leads it, because tech can't lead that. It just doesn't work. Tech is commoditized at the end of the day.
Great, this is fascinating. We could go on for hours. I could just think of more and more questions I'd like to ask you come tumbling out, but I think we ought to close it there. It was fascinating talking to you. Thank you very, very much for putting in your time, and good luck with changing the world to one where we all appreciate the benefit of user experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. We'll do that one experience at a time.